Hello and welcome. And today I'm going to be interviewing Vietnam War era veteran turned video creator Paul Schmel. For those of you who might not know you, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Paul Schmale. I'm 78 years old. Um, I served in during the Vietnam War, but not in Vietnam. I make that distinction because people who serve in combat, I think, deserve special uh, accolades, and I didn't earn that because I wasn't there. Um, I decided about 3 years ago to start a YouTube channel. Actually, the channel existed for a long time before that, but I didn't do anything with it. Excuse me. I have a lung disease, and so I cough sometimes. Um, about 3 years ago, I decided to become active with the YouTube channel, and my original plan was to make it a uh, political commentary channel. That's the reason for the name, Vietnam Era That Speaks Out. But I did a reaction to Oliver Anthony's song "Rich Men North of Richmond," which had gone viral. And that went viral on my channel. I got over 20,000 views in no time at all. And so I thought, well, I should do some more of these. And then I started getting requests. And before you know it, I was a music reaction channel. So that's where I'm at today. And now I have over 105,000 subscribers.
Okay. So it was originally going to be a political commentary channel and it became a music reaction channel. I mean, do you enjoy reacting to music? Do you like the process?
Yes, I've always loved music and lots of different types of music. And so it just seemed very natural to me. And then, of course, people were asking me for reactions. So I thought, well, I'm going to do this. And one thing led to another. And now I'm just almost strictly music reactions, although I will react to anything. And I've actually had requests for things like one guy asked me to review a special forces operation of the Filipino Army. And I thought, well, that's an odd one, but I did it anyway.
Okay. So it was going to be a political commentary channel in the beginning. Which political orientation would you say you lean towards? I mean, what are your politics like?
Well, I tend to be what people would call conservative, although I don't think of myself that way. I think of myself as an independent. But I would say I'm a constitutionally oriented American is what I would call myself.
Okay. And now moving on to the military stuff. What kind of work were you doing while serving in the military? And what part of the military were you in? Like, was it the army or the navy or the air force?
I was in the Navy and I was serving, doing secret work, all shore based. So I spent 6 years in the Navy, never set foot on a ship. But the work that I did is now declassified, so I can tell you about it. We had uh, arrays on the ocean floor that had hydrophones, so they were listening, and we would pick up the sounds of ships, and we could actually identify the ships by hull number just by the combination of sounds that they made.
Wow. Can you tell me the most exciting thing that happened to you while you were in the US Navy?
I got married. That for me was the most exciting thing.
I see. So you got married while you were in the Navy, while you were in the
Yes, yes, I was stationed in North Carolina for about 2 years, and I met a girl there and I married her.
Okay.
And I'm still married to her now, 55 years later.
Wow. Um, was enlisting in the military your own choice?
Yes. Of course, when I enlisted, it was during the Vietnam War. And so I had dropped out of college and I was pretty certain I was going to be drafted. And excuse me, I had always wanted to be in the Navy because I thought I would sail on ships and see the world. And so I enlisted in the Navy. And They had a program called the 120-day delay program where you enlisted and then 4 months later you actually went to boot camp. Excuse me. So I signed up for that. I need to get a drink of water. So I signed up for that. I was living in Iowa at the time, going to Luther College. And so I went down to Des Moines to sign up. And when I got home, my draft paper was in the mailbox. So I missed being in the Army by one trip to Des Moines.
So, what would you say influenced your decision to join? Was it patriotism or were you looking for excitement? What was the main reason?
Um, well, the main reason was I knew I was going to be going in the military because I had dropped out of college. And so I had always wanted to be in the Navy since I was a little boy. And so I just thought, well, I might as well enlist in the Navy.
And how old were you when you enlisted?
Ooh, 21.
Okay, and you mentioned you went to the boot camp. What sort of stuff did they do in the boot camp? Was it mainly training? And if so, what did that involve?
Well, I had a very unique boot camp experience because when I first got there, they had the way the Navy was set up, they had 4 weeks of what they call basic training, and then I think it was 5 weeks of advanced training. And during basic training, there were the instructor asked us, "Is there anybody here who can sing?" And being naive, I raised my hand, and they said, "Come here. You're going to be part of the Blue Jackets choir." The Blue Jackets choir was a choir that sang at the graduation ceremony each week. So after I finished basic training, I went straight to the Blue Jackets choir. And then when I got there, the chief that was in charge of that said, "Is there anybody here who can type?" And I raised my hand. And he said, "Okay, you're my yeoman." That's the Navy term for secretary. And so I spent, and actually, when you went to Blue Jackets Choir, I didn't know this when I signed up. Excuse me. But they extended your boot camp by 4 weeks. So I actually had 13 weeks of boot camp instead of 9.
Wow.
And the reason for that is because they have to practice and drill, and so to get the a decent amount of value out of the choir, they extend their boot camp tour for 4 weeks. So I was in boot camp or in boot camp for 13 weeks instead of 9, and the when the chief made me yeoman, he told me, "You don't have to go to any of the training. You can stay with me and work in the office." So that's what I did. So I went to rifle range, and that was it. And that was because I asked him to. I said, "I'd like to go to rifle range because I like to shoot." And he said, "Okay, you can do that."
So, you mentioned previously that you served on the East Coast of the US and Canada doing secret work. What kind of stuff did that involve? And could you walk me through, like, what would a day doing that sort of work look like?
Well, initially I was stationed at Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. There was a small base there, probably 120 personnel, and there was an array that came into the building, and it was uh, I don't know how big it was, but it wasn't that big. It was maybe 20,000 square feet, and there were no windows. Excuse me. And a typical day for me, I actually started out as a electronics technician, and then I was changed to ocean systems technician. But I did the same work, which was repair of equipment. And so a typical day for me when I go into the office and I'd sit down at a bench and start working on things that were not working and try to figure out what was wrong and fix them. So that's what I did every day.
And while you were doing that, of course, on the East Coast, the Vietnam War was going on. So, what part did the place you were stationed in play in the greater scheme of things?
Um, it was the purpose of this system was to detect ships and identify ships in the water. And so basically it was, I think you'd probably call it a Cold War system because we were tracking the Russians. Excuse me. Just to give you an example, we could pick up a Russian submarine coming out of Guantanamo Bay in Cuba and track them all the time they were in the water. And when they came out of the North Sea, we would pick them up. And so we knew where they were all the time.
So you're in this station, basically just picking up where the ships are, picking up where the enemy craft are. Obviously, if the enemy were to come and destroy this station or base, it would be very useful for them. So, was there ever an imminent threat or a risk that perhaps there would be an attack launched on where you were stationed?
Not on the East Coast, but we also had arrays on the West Coast. And I don't know if you have ever done any research on this. You're way too young to know about it. But there was a U.S. Navy ship called the USS Pueblo that was captured by North Korea. And they had information about our system, which was called SOSUS, SOSUS. And they they had information on all the West Coast arrays. And so after the ship was captured, a Russian submarine came out of, I think it was Murmansk, and came down through the Pacific Ocean and circled every single array just to kind of let us know we know where you are. But I don't think they ever the bases were all shore based, so I don't think they ever would have attacked those. That would have been a serious act of war.
And did you at that time have a fear that perhaps an attack could happen? Or was it quite
No,
obvious?
no, I never worried about that.
How has serving in the forces shaped your political worldview?
Um, well, it gave me a deep sense of patriotism. I'm very proud of my country. I know that my country has made a lot of mistakes and done a lot of evil things, but that's the leadership that we've had, not the country itself. And so I've always been a very proud American. I wish that we would return to the constitutional republic that we were designed to be. There's a lot of things about our system now that are not what the founding fathers intended. For example, the 17th Amendment changed the way that we elect senators so that they're now elected by popular vote instead of by the state legislatures. And the original design of the Constitution was that the Senate would be the House of Representatives is like the Parliament in Europe, in London. They represent the people, but the senators were supposed to represent the states. And now they represent the people. And so it's just like a smaller version of the House, basically. We've lost some of the separation of powers that were designed into the system.
Wow. I mean, you have said that there are some things that have gone wrong, and that's one of them. What are some other things you think that have gone astray?
Well, we have since I've been alive, we have been involved in lots of conflict all over the world, and I don't have proof of this, but I'm certain that our CIA has started wars and started revolutions and started and assassinated leaders around the world simply because we disagreed with them, and that's just wrong. The just because you disagree with a leader of somebody else's country doesn't give you the right to take them out. And I think we've done way too much of that.
Do you think it would be better for America to get less involved in foreign wars?
Yes, absolutely. Having said that, I think there are times when it is necessary. World War II is a perfect example of that. We actually tried to stay out of that, and that was a bad decision, in my opinion, because the entire world was being threatened. But there are circumstances where it's just necessary and important for us to be involved. But there are other circumstances where we really ought to be minding our own business and letting, excuse me, letting other people sort out their difficulties without us.
There's been a lot of talk about, for example, the Russia and Ukraine conflict. What do you think of that? Should the US be giving weapons to Ukraine or any funding or not? What's your thoughts on that?
I have mixed feelings about that because I think about it from the position of the Ukrainians, and they're basically under a lot of pressure and they need help. But excuse me, um, I kind of I don't follow that real closely, but I do try to keep up with it. And to be honest with you, I think the Ukrainians are teaching the world modern warfare with drones. They're really making a lot of they're conducting a lot of acts that people never would have thought of before. And they've really opened up a lot of people's minds to drone warfare, which I think they have not perfected, but they've done an excellent job with it. And I just think that the Ukrainians are obviously a very proud and very strong people, and they're not going to give up until the last man is dead. And I just wish Russia would stop trying to intervene in other people's affairs.
During the Vietnam War era, there were huge anti-war protests. What are your views on these?
I think the vast majority of the people that were involved were misguided. They didn't understand what was going on over there. There was a small element that was openly working with the communists to try and overthrow America in that war. And that's proven fact. Um, they, I think, see, this is a really complex subject. I've studied the Vietnam War a lot, and I think that the United States failure in Vietnam was due to the political leadership that we had. They were afraid to do what needed to be done to win the war. And it could have been won if they had done it right. But they didn't want to. They were various reasons. They were afraid that if they got too aggressive, China might get involved. But China was already involved. They had over 400,000 advisors in North Vietnam. So worrying about them getting involved when they already were was kind of silly. But of course, excuse me, uh, they might not have been aware of that because intelligence is not always that great.
Yes. Well, the Vietnamese used a lot of guerrilla warfare tactics, and I've read before that the US Army did combat them, but they also did struggle to fight against the guerrilla fighters because they weren't like stand-up fighters who would come to a battlefield. It would more be like skirmish attacks. Do you think that's true?
Yes, it was early on. It was definitely early on. And the Vietnamese used, the North Vietnamese used tunnels and underground facilities very effectively to conduct ambush attacks and that sort of thing. And they were very effective in their fighting. Later in the war, it was more of a conventional war. And actually, by 1972, it was a completely conventional war, including tanks. And so it was a mixture. Early on, it was mostly guerrilla. Later on, it was mostly conventional. And I think the big mistake that the United States made was the military leadership told the president and his advisors, we need to block the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Laos. But they had this weird idea that Laos was neutral because of a treaty we had signed with Laos. But the thing is, the North Vietnamese weren't honoring the treaty. They were in Laos. And so what we should have done was, and this is my personal opinion now, One of the things that I really hate about the Vietnam War is that we went over there and we kind of took over South Vietnam and ran the war for them. And I don't think that's what we should have done. What we should have done was we should have taken our troops and put them in Laos and blocked the Ho Chi Minh Trail and then told the South Vietnamese, you take care of the guerrillas that you have. We'll make sure no more come in and let them fight the war they wanted to. But we had people in our government that were, the only way I know to describe it is they were racist. They thought of the brown people of South Vietnam as being lesser. You can actually read some statements from some of our leadership, like the president, who talked about them that way. And that to me is shameful. I think every human being on earth is equal. I don't care what your color is. I don't care what your race is. I don't care what country you're from. We're all the same. Every one of us is a human being, and we deserve the same respect regardless of what our background is. And our country, far too often, and when I say country, I'm referring specifically to our leadership, has not been that way. They've not thought that way. They've been elitist and a racist and completely disregarded the desires and feelings of the people that they're intervening for. And that to me is wrong. If you're going to go help somebody, you should be helping them, not taking it over. And that's what we did in Vietnam.
Very interesting. What would you say to someone now, a young person who wants to join the army or one of the forces?
Um, the military is a strange beast. You're going to be living in a atmosphere that's completely different from what you're used to. You're going to be isolated basically and become a part of a machine. And the one thing you have to be very careful about is that you don't lose your soul in the process.
Were there any really interesting people that you met along the way as you were in the military?
Yes, there were. There's one guy who I was very close to, who here we are 55 years later. We're still corresponding with his wife. He's dead now, but we still correspond, send Christmas cards and letters to his wife, and we know about their children and that sort of thing. So that I guess you could say was a lifelong relationship. There were some others that there was a guy when I was stationed in Newfoundland, Canada, who was I'll never forget him. His name was Danny Boyd. He was a very cocky and insensitive, and his wife was kind of coarse. And we lived in a base housing, and the walls were very thin, and we could hear them cussing all the time. I mean, constantly throughout the day, and that was kind of funny. Matter of fact, they told us a story about their son. They had gone home to visit family, and they were sitting at the dinner table eating, and their son was frustrated because he wanted butter and nobody was passing him the butter. So finally, he yells out, "Would someone please pass the puck and butter?" He couldn't say the word. He couldn't pronounce his F's. So he said, "Would someone please pass the puck and butter?" And they told that story like it was funny. And I thought, golly, you're teaching your son to cuss and he's only 5 years old. That's ridiculous.
Wow. Have you ever been involved in direct combat yourself? And if so, have you ever killed anybody?
No, I've never been in combat, never killed anyone, never even fired a rifle in a dangerous situation.
77% of young Americans are too fat or mentally ill to qualify for military service. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it's the result of a lot of things. Um, our culture. If you go to a restaurant in America, you're going to get enough food, at least for me, to have two meals just from one meal. And so when I go to a restaurant, or I don't normally go sit down in a restaurant, I just pick up food and bring it home. Uh, I'll start out before I even begin eating by cutting everything in half and putting one half in the fridge. And then I'll eat the other half because it's too much, way too much. But many people will eat it all. And if your caloric requirements are for a day or let's say 1,500 calories, and you're eating 3,000 a day, you're going to get fat. It's just that simple. And also, our culture, we don't have a culture of exercise. And so a lot of people tend not to do any exercise at all.
If you go to a country like Italy or France or just parts of Europe, you will notice that the portions of food there are much smaller. But there is another thing. The ingredients used for the food there will just be much healthier. For example, there are a whole lot of chemicals that are in food that are just banned in Europe. But in America, there are all sorts of different seed oils and chemicals and additives that are allowed in food and that a lot of manufacturers use, which are very unhealthy.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. And I think that our current Secretary of Health, Robert F. Kennedy, is trying to change that I think he's gotten some food dyes banned in America, which were banned in Europe a long time ago. And he's also creating different programs to try and encourage people to eat less and to exercise more. Excuse me.
Yeah. A lot of conventional sort of health advice has been to, have more vegetables and carbs, but have less red meat. But I've heard that he's actually turned that around and recommended for people to have more red meat and have raw milk, which is quite controversial. How do you feel about this?
I wasn't aware of that. Um, I, I don't know enough about it to say if red meat is good or bad. I just know I eat it. I love steak, love hamburgers. Um, I eat fish too. I love salmon and trout. Uh, I just don't know. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. Sometimes I look at vegans, and I'm just like, how can you live like this? Just eating veggies and very stringy roots and stuff. Do you think there's a way to fix fat and mentally ill people? As this is also a problem which will affect society outside of the military.
Hmm. Well, everyone has freedom of will. So if you wanna eat and you don't want to take care of yourself, then there's nothing really we can do except try to educate you. But the there's society as a whole has a certain attitude about things, and if you can change that attitude, I think you can change the overall health of a nation, and you can change their eating habits as well by just education and encouragement. But as far as mental health goes, I think mental health starts in the home. If you have a good parents, if you have a good father and a good mother, you're much more likely to be mentally well. And if you're raised in an atmosphere where, for example, the parents are constantly fighting and at each other's throats and not being loving, then that's going to affect your mental health as well. And then, of course, I think there is somewhat a excuse me, a chemical component to it for some people where there's an imbalance in their brain and there's not much you can do about that. Maybe there's some pharmaceuticals that can help, but some people are just unfortunately born in a way where their brains are messed up and they can't do anything about it.
The article I read, and there's quite a few articles on this, that a lot of people are too overweight and obese and mentally ill to be recruited for the army. When I read it, I was just thinking that number one, if this continues to happen, then there'll be a lack of healthy people to recruit for the army, and you need healthy people. So this could become a bigger problem in the future, I think.
I absolutely agree with you. It's, you have to be at least capable of being in good shape to be in the military. And the first thing that happens when you go to boot camp is they're going to whip you into shape. And so some people couldn't handle it. In the Navy, they had something called the 50-20 squad, which was people that were not handling boot camp well. And they would they would live together in a different barracks. And I never saw this myself, but I heard that for some of these people, what they would actually do is they'd march them out in the morning, they'd have them dig a hole and fill a bucket, and then they'd have to carry that bucket across the base to another location, dig another hole, fill the hole with what was in the bucket, and then put the dirt that they had dug up into the bucket and go back and do it on the other side again. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I heard. And they also had a section that dealt with bedwetters. And some of those guys just got discharged because they couldn't handle it.
Wow. So, do you think we could implement this? Well, do you think it would be a good idea to implement techniques like this, almost training camps where people could go and get fit, but run by the government or something like that?
You mean just civilians?
Yeah, for civilians, for a lot of people who should lose weight and just become healthy.
Hmm. I don't know. You can't compel them to do it. You could make it available, and some people would take advantage of it, but I don't know that the ones who need to would. You know, Usually the people that need it the most are the ones who want it the least.
Yeah. So you started a YouTube channel where you offer your perspective as a Vietnam era veteran and react to a lot of things, including music. What made you want to start this channel and make videos?
Uh, I've done a lot of different things through the years. I had a blog for a while called uh, Anti-Media. And what I did was I wrote about things that the media reported about that were incorrect. I'll give you an example. The very first post I ever made was about an AP article about a meteor striking in southwestern Washington state. Okay. And I read this article and they said it was the size of a car. And so I thought, well, how much damage would a meteor the size of a car do? So I looked it up on the web and it was devastating. And so I thought, gosh, there must be a lot of deaths. So I called the mayor of the town where the meteor supposedly hit and asked him, how many casualties do you have? And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, according to the AP, a meteor just hit outside your town. And from what I understand of the size of the meteor, the blast radius would have damaged buildings and killed people in the town. And he said, there's been no meteor strike here. And I thought, what? No, I just read this in an article. And so in the article, they mentioned a professor at the University of Washington who they had consulted on this article. And so I went on the University of Washington website to look up the professor, couldn't find his name.
Wow,
So I called the university and I said,
that's crazy.
Do you have a professor named so and so? And they said, no, there's no professor here by that name.
Maybe it was just
And
like a
so I thought,
mistake.
yeah, somebody told them a meteor hit and they just ran with the story without double checking. And I think, excuse me, I think that's a problem that we have with the medias. A lot of times they won't do any fact checking, they'll just print it.
We know that you served your country and that you also started a highly successful YouTube channel, but there seems to be a missing part here. What did you do after leaving the military, but before you started posting videos on this channel? So think like just after you left the military, and I suppose you weren't in it anymore.
Um, I have to think back. What was I doing? Uh, I can't remember. What was I doing when I got out? Uh, I moved back to North Carolina because that's where my wife was from. And oh, I went to work for Procter and Gamble. Excuse me. They were building a new plant to produce Pringles, and I was an early hire because of my electronics background. It was a lot of electronic equipment in the factory, and so I did that for a while. Excuse me. I gotta get some water. Over the years, I've done a lot of different things. My wife is a registered nurse, and so no matter where we lived, she could get a job right away, making good money. And so I was kind of a, I guess you could call me a gadabout or a ne'er-do-well. I would do various things just because I wanted to. For example, I drove a semi truck for 3.5 years. I used to do automobile repairs. I worked in gas stations and dealerships. I've done a lot of different things. And then I finally settled down and went to work as I started out doing what they call lab management in a college, where the students have computer labs where they can work,
Okay.
and
Yep.
I started running that, and then I eventually moved into computer security, and that's what I did for the last 16 years of my career.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. That's the end of the interview, and thank you for coming on.